Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 10th of August 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, that's mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, with topics for future shows. The game in the background is Shadow Era. Got back into it again. I actually finally got around to spending all of those Shadow Crystals that I got from kickstarting their physical card thing. Yeah, that's a lot of damn Shadow Crystals. I think it was something like 92,000 Shadow Crystals, so I now own 4 of every card in the game, which is cool, because that means I can build some fairly competitive decks. It's fun stuff, man. I really do like this game quite a lot. I think the only problem I've got with it, maybe, is that as a player, when it's not your turn, there's nothing you can really do. At least in Magic, you've got things like interrupts and instants that you can do. Here, not so much. You've got to essentially sit it out. So it's more of a passive, take your turn, then wait for the other guy to do whatever kind of thing. But it's still a good game, and I enjoy it a hell of a lot. It's pretty well balanced as well these days, so that's always nice. When I was playing it the first time, the game actually didn't have a complete set of cards. They were still building it. So now that there's a full set of 200 and they're working on the expansion, things are looking pretty good for this game. So they still haven't done much to improve the user interface. I think there's certainly a lot more they can do with that, but there's always room for improvement. Game is still fun. First email comes in right here from Kevin that says, a couple of days ago I saw an article that Irrational, the developer behind BioShock Infinite, are recruiting developers who have worked on a game with average 85 Metacritic score or higher. Now, I've heard your opinions regarding Metacritic several times before, but it annoys me how Irrational are indirectly punishing the individual developer for what a group of devs have achieved. The individuals behind games like Fallout New Vegas, Metacritic 84, whom are perfectly viable developers, are cut out due to what a single website says. My question is, what are your thoughts regarding companies adding Metacritic scores as a condition of employment? I would want to slap anyone that did that. I really, really would. It is an absurd notion. The fact that a developer is doing this, that boggles the mind. I can understand some dumb publishers doing that. Take-Two, for God's sake, is obsessed with it. Their CEO, Strauss Zelnick, really loves Metacritic. He's just obsessed with it and claims that it essentially defines the success of a title. He was even talking about the importance of Metacritic scores when talking about THQ's recent financial struggles. Now, I've got to say that since the uproar on the internet, they removed this from the job listing. Smart thing to do, because that is not good PR at all, but just bear in mind, Irrational Games is published by Take-Two, so I have a feeling the obsession with Metacritic has perhaps come from there. I think the point that you made is very valid. An individual developer cannot necessarily be blamed for the Metacritic score, and indeed, it's absurd to judge a game by its Metacritic anyway. The only thing Metacritic is good for is giving a vague idea of whether a game is good or not, and I do very much mean vague. If a game gets 37 or 40 Metacritic, it's probably pretty bad. In fact, I think if you're going to use Metacritic, and I would honestly suggest that you don't, because the more you use that bloody site, the more power it gets, the more ad revenue it generates, the more important it becomes in the industry, then I would only be using it for just looking at the list of reviews, because that's what it does. It pulls the reviews together, and then I can click on the reviews to go and read them on the site in question. That's handy, but I would not be looking at that aggregate score. And indeed, Metacritic would be fine if it didn't have that. It's the aggregate score that really bothers me, because it's defined by a bunch of guys who created the algorithm. They just weight it in the way that they feel it should be weighted. Some sites are weighted more than others. If you don't give a score, you're just not listed at all. Not to mention the fact, and I've said this time and again, I don't really need to actually repeat myself. It's not worthy of a rampage, because I think you guys already know this. I would strongly urge you not to use Metacritic. I really, really would. The less power Metacritic has, the better it is for the industry. Trust me on this. Developers get screwed over by Metacritic all the time. They get fired for low Metacritic scores. They get their bonuses withheld for low Metacritic scores. There are publishers that look at games based on their Metacritic score and don't allow for sequels as a direct result of not acquiring some arbitrary number determined by a stilted and broken algorithm. And then just think how unbelievably stupid it would be to block developers from, say, People Can Fly. Bulletstorm has an average of 84. People Can Fly are incredibly talented. What about Platinum Games? Not that guys from Platinum Games would go and work for Irrational, but Vanquish got 84. Crackdown, 83. That's Real-Time Worlds, who unfortunately, of course, don't exist anymore. Catherine, 82. Mirror's Edge, 81. Metro 2033, 81. Child of Eden, 84. Fallout New Vegas, 84. Come on! There is without a doubt no reason at all to make this a requirement for employment. None. It, in fact, actually restricts the number of great developers that can come and work for you. Who thought this was a good idea? Are you suggesting that any of those many examples that I just gave are bad games and the developers shouldn't work for Irrational? I am going to go with no. The sooner we rid ourselves of the curse of caring about video game scores that are arbitrarily determined through no preset or regimented or standardized system, the better off we will be. This one comes in from J.N. Fernandez that says it's well known that Criterion has taken over development for Need for Speed games, thanks in part to the highly successful Hot Pursuit remake. Looking at their upcoming Most Wanted remake, it seems more and more like Burnout Paradise 2 based on all the footage and their plans for it. Autolog will play a bigger part, the race routes are open to the player, customization has not been featured as of yet, and more importantly, it won't feature any sort of storyline whatsoever. These features draw it closer to Burnout than Most Wanted. A lot of people are looking forward to this remake and seeing all these changes. I can't help but feel that a lot of people are also going to be disappointed. Do you think it's the right move for Criterion to continue Burnout under the guise of Need for Speed? I think it is. The reason being that Need for Speed got awfully stale and really didn't know where it wanted to go. So I think it's a pretty solid idea, honestly, because Need for Speed really hasn't seemed to have any direction for the longest time. The older games did fairly well. We were talking about stuff like the old Hot Pursuit and Porsche Challenge and things like that, but it really went into its own when they released Need for Speed Underground, which was street racing. It was like racer nonsense and being able to customize your car with neons, had a good soundtrack. It actually had this really great sense of speed. That's probably the thing that I would identify as the most successful part of the Need for Speed series. They always make it look like you're going really fast. They had some great motion blur, even in the original Need for Speed. Need for Speed Underground 2 was actually a bit more open world, and that I didn't really like, funnily enough. I think it was mostly because it was just a pain in the arse to drive around to try and get my car customized at the various places. It just was a complete waste of time, and the driving outside of races wasn't as enjoyable. Then, of course, you had Most Wanted, which was great, in my opinion, and that's where things started to go a little bit wrong. You had Carbon. You then had Pro Street, which wasn't very good either. Undercover, which was a real disappointment. And then you had all sorts of problems. Shift. Oh, God, Shift. Wow. Well, the weird thing about Shift is that it wasn't a bad game. The problem with Shift is that it was nothing like Need for Speed. Not at all. Shift was actually closer to a sim than anything else. And a lot of people liked that, certainly. But then it put off a whole lot of other people. That said, it ended up being commercially successful. It sold 4 million copies, so I guess people were curious enough about it. Shift 2, as far as I'm aware, didn't do as well. But if we were to go back to what we were just talking about, they always seem to get really good Metacritic ratings, which of course is pleasing EA, which I suppose is why the franchise continues. That and metric tons worth of sales. Only The Run and Undercover did badly in reviews. Everything else has scored very well and has been well reviewed by most people. The funny thing about Need for Speed is that I don't think you can ever accuse it of sticking to the same formula over and over again. Other than racing fast, what else is there? I mean, look through the list of Need for Speed games. You can say, when Underground came out, oh, right, Underground 2, right, I can see where they're going, oh, Most Wanted was actually different, and oh, Carbon was kind of different. They're all kind of variations on the same street racing theme, but after that, once you get to Pro Street, you look at Pro Street, then Shift, and like, well, suddenly this has become a sim. Then you've got Hot Pursuit, which is a mixture of street racing and, obviously, cop chasing. I made the criticism earlier that it doesn't know where it wants to go, but in theory, that could be a good thing. This is a franchise that I view as far from stale. The first Need for Speed came out in 1994, and then ever since 1997, there has been a Need for Speed game every single year. No, seriously, there has. 2 was in 97, Hot Pursuit 3 was in 98, you had a High Stakes 99, Porsche Unleashed was 2000, and then you had Motor City Online, Hot Pursuit 2, Underground 2, blah, 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 blah. They release one of these bloody things every year, but they do keep changing things up, and they actually do change the studio around quite a lot as well. The first games were made by Pioneer, then it was EA Canada, followed by EA Seattle for Motor City Online, which was originally called Need for Speed Motor City. Then you've got 3 games by Black Box, then you've got Canada again, Black Box again, Slightly Mad, who are the guys that really deal with the sim stuff, which is why you had them do Shift and Shift 2. Montreal did Nitro, which was a Wii game. They're really all over the place with this, honestly, and that's kind of neat. It's, I suppose, the same as handing The Simpsons to a different set of writers every few seasons, just to make sure it stays reasonably fresh. And I think they've succeeded for the most part in doing that. I'm kind of excited to know that this Most Wanted game is going to be very similar to Burnout Paradise. I mean, oh god, I'm even looking at the imagery. It really evokes Burnout Paradise. The box art's actually got some notable artistic similarities, particularly the big white and red contrast that was also on the Burnout Paradise box. I don't think that open-world gameplay means that it's not a Need for Speed game anymore. There are a number of Need for Speed games that had open-world elements to them, Need for Speed Underground 2 probably being one of the most successful examples, so I don't really view that as being a problem. I think that they, for the most part, have managed to keep the Need for Speed style of racing over the Burnout style of racing. The way that the cars crash is nowhere near the same. They don't have that emphasis on crashing either. At the end of the day, the Burnout Paradise open world style actually fits perfectly into this idea of street racing. Because at the end of the day, you're not talking about pre-made tracks. You're talking about racing through streets. Of course you're going to alter your route. Of course there won't necessarily be barriers and things like that. That's the whole point. They're also claiming that Most Wanted will not be as arcadey in its driving style as Burnout, or indeed as Hot Pursuit. They're actually looking for a slightly tighter driving model, probably along the lines of the original Most Wanted and the Underground series. All I can say is, I'll probably pick this up, and I hope, 1, it doesn't suck like The Run did, and 2, it doesn't have a bad PC port like Hot Pursuit did. Because as good a game as Hot Pursuit was, it really tanked my frame rate hard. It was not an enjoyable game on PC at all, so here's hoping that Most Wanted works out well for the PC. You might not know this, but I actually really like racing games. I am what I would class as a casual racing game fan, and I very much like arcade races, so Need for Speed is high up on the list there with Burnout of games that I really enjoy. This one comes in from Fred that says, my question is about whether you find the idea of a game which you can go back to and play more than most other games, for example. Whoa, a run-on sentence there. Okay. For example, if I loved playing Skyrim, I'd play that, but when I played it through, or when I got bored of it, I would begin on another game. I would then play that game, eventually get bored and begin a new one. However, while I played those games, I would every now and again go back to, for example, Minecraft and play that. I myself have Minecraft as a backup game, so that I always have something to play, even if I get bored with the current game at hand. The reason being that Minecraft is a game with replay value, making it able to be played over a long period. What are your thoughts about a so-called backup game, and do you have one? I don't think I have one backup game. I've got several backup games. I'll always revert to some kind of multiplayer game, more often than not a MOBA. That's usually my staple. At least I know in that I can go play a match. Very much I'm finding Blacklight is my backup game right now. If I've spent a day doing WTF is, doing research, playing through games, all that kind of stuff, I will usually just resort to Blacklight or Awesome Nauts or Smite or League of Legends. They're all multiplayer games. I don't have a backup single-player game. It's actually unfortunate. I think I should, but I don't feel there are all that many single-player games that really would work for that, because you've got to have a single-player game with a lot of replayability. Minecraft is a great example of that, but then you've got to think, well, what else? I definitely wouldn't play single-player in Terraria. It's nowhere near as fun as it is in multiplayer. I think I used to play stuff like SimCity or Civilizations or anything like that, so it always comes down to the ability, I suppose, to create a skirmish or custom game and just play that and not have it really harm you or come to an end at the wrong kind of time. Even if you finish your skirmish game, you can always just jump right into another one, so you can keep going on that. But I don't think you can ever have a backup game with a storyline. I think that's probably the most important thing to know. It's not really about replayability per se, it's about storyline. If your backup game runs out, what the hell do you do? I suppose you panic and maybe you go outside, and as everyone is well aware, that's a very dangerous thing to do, and you certainly shouldn't do it, because who knows what might happen? You might get diseases or be bitten by a dog. For me, I find myself very scatterbrained with games these days. I have difficulty playing them for any great length of time. I don't think that I would ever go back to only having a single backup game anymore. I think I've got to have a few going at any given time, because there might be times when I just don't feel like playing it for any great length, assuming I even have a great length of time to spend. Hell, if I had a great length of time to spend, I don't think I'd know what I'd do with myself. Good lord, that is actually a little bit scary when I think about it. Oh, you don't have any work to do today. What am I going to do? I don't know. I guess I can watch Futurama. That might work. Seriously, I've actually stopped taking days off lately because I've just got really bored. Unless we're going somewhere with the family, I tend to have difficulty sticking with one game for any length of time anymore. I don't know what happened to me. Maybe it's just as I've got older that I don't really feel like immersing myself in games for hours anymore. I just like hopping between games, having a little bit of fun here, a little bit of fun there. I don't think that's necessarily wrong, but I do pine for the days when I was able to sit there playing an RPG for 8 hours and not actually get bored of it. That seems to have disappeared, and I have difficulty recapturing that feeling. I did manage it with the latest Civilization expansion. It takes a very special kind of game these days to allow me to sink an awful lot of time into it. Hell, I don't even know if I'll spend a huge amount of time with PlanetSide 2. I think it would rely on me getting in a group and organizing some serious outfit work with it. I think if I did that, I'd probably play for a while, and that could even end up being my backup game, but I think more often than not, when you look at a game like that can really engross you, it doesn't even become your backup game, it becomes your main focus, and then you burn out on it after a while, and you don't come back to it. Same with Civ, actually. I haven't played a game of Civilization 5 Gods and Kings for a little while, and yet I sunk a ton of time into it on launch, so, there you go. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox. People keep asking me about Battle Royale for King of the Web. It's not happening yet. Tier 2 is currently going on. Tier 1 doesn't start until August the 16th. Yes, I have a strategy in mind. I will share that with you when the time is right. I will be making update videos for our attempt to raise a bunch of money for charity water. I will keep you posted. I'll see you next time.